everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by Projections, North America's leading provider of employee communication resources, including video, websites, e-learning, social media, and virtual events to help you connect with your team. For more information, you can visit us online at projectionsinc.com. I am Jennifer Oraqua, COO of Projections, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Now, everyone wants a little recognition for the work that they do. And according to a recent survey by OGO, 40% of employed Americans would put more energy into their work if they were recognized more often. Unfortunately, 82% of employed Americans don't feel that their supervisors recognize them enough for their contributions. According to another survey, this lack of recognition and engagement drives 44% of employees to switch jobs. These shortcomings have been heightened by the prevalence of positive feedback and kudos in our lives outside of work, thanks to social media. We're sharing our restaurant opinions on Yelp and rating drivers on Uber and evaluating our coworkers' skills on LinkedIn on a regular basis, making supervisors' silence at work all the more deafening. Here to help us address this situation is Mark Bunting, a successful serial entrepreneur and veteran technology C-suite marketing executive who is also the CEO and founder of Grata, a first-of-its-kind social media platform that connects frontline service employees with customers and employers. Mark, I want to thank you so much for joining us on Project HR today.
Oh, Jennifer, thanks for having me.
So, Mark, before we get into the details of your platform, I want to talk a little bit about employee recognition in general. Why is it such an important aspect of work? And let's start with why it's important to employees.
Sure. Well, I think you can almost click up from why is it important to work employees and to us as human beings. I think recognition is just a core component of people feeling good about what they do day in and day out. And a job is obviously an extension of that. But employees need to feel a part of teams. Employees need to feel recognized. And most importantly, employees need to feel appreciated. And that recognition is really sort of that key component at letting those people who have either waited on you or work within your employee to let them know that they're appreciated.
So, why is it then important to employers and the organizations that these people work for?
Yes. Well, recognition drives a whole lot of different outcomes. And so, from the perspective of an employer, there's a lot of data on a couple of fronts. We like to talk about the offensive benefits and the defensive benefits. I'll address offensive first. Recognition fuels a whole lot of terrific business outcomes with frontline QSRs or frontline employees. First and foremost, the data suggests that they drive top line growth. Employees who feel recognized and appreciated on average drive 4 to 14% more than their peers. So that delta is clearly tied to employees feeling a part of teams and being recognized. So right off the bat, there's a top line benefit. But on the defensive side of the equation, we know that feeling recognized and appreciated mitigates employee churn. It drives better attitudes. It drives better team development. There are all these positives that come out of making those people who are representing your brand on the front line feel like they are appreciated. So whether it's defensively saving money, churn mitigation, employee rehiring, lost opportunities, et cetera, or if it's driving top line and greater customer engagement, the offensive and the defensive side of the house argue that recognition fuels a lot of extremely important business outcomes for organizations.
For sure. So when we say recognition, what exactly are we talking about here? Is this just simple verbal praise from a leader, or are we talking about formal reviews? What counts as recognition?
Yes. Well, I think it's all of the above, right? And depending on the industry, recognition takes different forms. I'll speak primarily to large customer facing teams, whether it would be a big box retailer or a service organization, hospitality, you name it, those service sector employees that are engaging our customers day in and day out. Clearly, annual reviews, quarterly reviews, internal communication around the praise and recognition, and therefore the development of our team members is super important. Depending on how progressive an organization is today, many of these companies are undertaking these types of steps in some shape or form, some much better than others. But one thing that's come out of COVID is that everybody is now focused on recognizing and taking care of these frontline people, at least from an internal perspective. But the external is also super important. We miss opportunities every day to harvest real-time customer feedback, where customers might praise an employee on the front lines of, say, a Home Depot who did a great job helping you in the store. You know, that praise matters. How good do you feel when you would get a call to your boss or your employer to say, hey, I just want to let you know Jennifer is really exceptional. We love working with her. What a wonderful job she did. It's part of our human condition. And so that external praise is also exceedingly important to the individual.
Depending on the recipient, the form that the recognition takes can also be critical. I mean, public versus private.
Well, it can be, and I think that's super important. I think from a public perspective, first of all, there's very little public recognition that gets documented anyway, positive or negative. But you're absolutely right that it's really important that it is the right kind of praise. The public praise, though, really has to do more with career development. Let me unpack that for just a moment. You and I live in a LinkedIn enabled, a Workday enabled, Salesforce.com enabled, mature, white collar eco class system, right? We're all connected to our customers. We're connected to our employer. We're connected to our prospective employer to be. And so we have that rich, robust community where our praise, our recognition, our good deeds, our advancements are all part of our living, breathing LinkedIn profile that takes us forward. But that same opportunity does not exist when you jump across the aisle to blue collar or service sector professionals. The good work they do every day doesn't get memorialized. All that feedback from a customer that might have a good experience, which would go into their portfolio, doesn't get documented, nor does
Hmm.
the book of business, their customers, all the people that you might wait on for 3 years at your job as a bartender or as working the front counter at your dry cleaners. Why is it that white collar professionals get to build a book of business and get to document all their successes, but we don't extend the same courtesy to the service sector or blue collar side of the house? And so that's why it's so important to create this connectivity from the perspective of career development of those individual employees.
So, on another note, which do you think is more beneficial? Receiving praise or giving it? Or are there benefits on both sides?
Okay, that's too easy. Yes, there's benefit on both sides. So first of all, we love being praised and recognized. Okay,
Sure.
we've got again we've pointed out there's data that suggests that when people do feel praised and recognized, they sell more, they stay longer at their jobs. It's just part of being a human being, but it happens to be a part of being a human being that also drives some really exciting business outcomes. On the side of giving praise, from the perspective of a business entity, there are all these great data points on how it mitigates churn and saves all this money on rehiring, et cetera. So there are plenty of business drivers on why giving praise is important. But on a very human level, and I'll share with you a bit of an embarrassing story just to drive home or situate this point.
Okay.
I go to a local Starbucks with great frequency.
Mhm.
And one morning, I got my coffee, I got back in the car, and I was thinking about the barista, the young lady that always waits on me. And she's always in this unbelievably upbeat and cheerful mood. And it kind of dawned on me that, I really needed to call that out. I hadn't really told her how much I enjoy her waiting on me. And I got out of my car, I got back in line, I waited till I got up the counter, and she looked at me, she goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Was there something wrong with your coffee?" And I said, "No, no, 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 nothing wrong at all." And I put maybe $3 in her tip jar for my $4 uh,
Mhm.
grande latte, fat free, no sweetener, whatever, right?
Right,
And
right.
uh, and I said, "No, I got back in line. I just want to tell you, you're always in such a good mood. You're so cheerful and bubbly. You make my day. I just want to tell you thank you." Well, you could hear a pin drop, and she begins to cry.
Oh, wow.
Now I'm completely embarrassed because I'm looking back at the line and I can tell just from the expressions on the people's faces, they're thinking, who is the old guy who came in here and made the sweet young girl at the front counter,
Right.
reduce her to tears, right?
Right,
No good deed goes unpunished. And
right.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you." She said, "No, no, 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 no. Seriously, I just want to tell you that means so much to me. That's why I do what I do. I love what you just said because that's why I do this. I love being a part of people's days. I love being here in the morning and starting their day off right. I guess you could call me a people person, the expression, right?" And so it just really touched her heart.
Mhm.
Well, I know that made her so happy that it made her cry. I, on the other hand, got in the car and I was just giddy. I was grinning from ear to ear, knowing that I'd had that kind of impact on another human being for a small act of appreciation. And I'm certain for the rest of the day, I was walking on cloud nine. I probably tipped 50+% on my lunch tab. I was just in a gracious giving mood. And I think it connects us with that expression we've known for millennia. It is better to give than receive. It fills
Mhm.
your heart when you do the right thing,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
especially when you see the reaction in another human being. And so we call it the gratitude loop. This
Hmm.
idea that when you give praise and you give gratification to someone else, you feel that in your heart. And I'm not trying to get too much into the soft arts
Right.
because absolutely business outcomes that it's driving. But I do think it's important to understand, just from a human condition standpoint, giving praise and receiving praise is core to making us human beings.
Yeah, definitely. So why, knowing all that, and we all know it inherently at some level, why do you think employee recognition is such a pain point for companies? I mean, we all like to give good news.
Yeah. Well, so depending on the organization, I think it's getting easier internally because we're starting to develop programs to at least, again, acknowledge peers and others inside our organization. The problem with the external praise, which is the real sweet spot that we all want to get to, is that there haven't been any tools. For example, if I'm in a Home Depot and Frank gives me world class service and I want to praise Frank, there's no mechanism for me to do that in a painless or frictionless way. What am I going to do? Walk up to the counter and say, "Hey, could you bring the manager out? I'd like to
Right.
talk to you.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to let you know this guy that's working on aisle 12 did a great job."
Right.
We just don't do that. It's
No.
the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And depending on your personality type, you may be very uncomfortable doing that. And I totally get that. So we haven't made it easy. There haven't been any tools for us to do that. Now, we might send you a survey monkey a week later and ask you if you could remember who waited on you and would you give them a rating and let us know
Hmm.
how you did.
Hmm.
We might give you a paper in your bag when you check out that says, "Hey, if you have a couple of minutes, go online to that URL and give us a review." And we just don't do that. So we don't have a tools that capture that in that emotive, immediate way so that we could get the data, we could get the praise and do something with it.
All right, Mark, we're going to take a sponsorship break right now. But when we return, we'll get into how we, as leaders, can get better about employee recognition. So stay with us.
Are you new to labor relations or working in HR and ta-da, now need labor relations skills? Today's sponsor, Union Proof Certification, has got you covered. Union Proof Certification is a comprehensive online course in labor relations that will help you get the knowledge you need to understand what's at stake, the language used by unions and attorneys, the resources available for assistance, and how you can turn a potentially frightening situation into a positive one. You can learn more at unionproof.com/certification. Learn years of labor relations knowledge at your own pace and earn 24 SHRM or HRCI credits at the same time.
And we're back with Mark Bunting, CEO and founder of Grata. So, Mark, clearly employee recognition is a problem across the board. So, how can we as leaders and as companies get better about recognizing employee success?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to prioritize it. And fortunately, if we look for a silver lining in the COVID crisis, I think one of the takeaways that's been exceedingly positive is that we finally have appreciated the value of those frontline people that were stacking our groceries or delivering our food, that these people were really our lifeline. And by the way, shame on us for it taking COVID to get us there, but
Sure.
nonetheless, we've arrived. So first of all, it's about prioritizing. And I think COVID is making this easier for organizations because there were two things that happened. One, companies got somewhat shamed. So you may have noticed a lot of C-level executives taking to the microphone to talk about either battle pay or new employee plans to recognize and take good care of these people. So some executives got shamed into addressing the issue. But others who are more progressive realized that, gosh, in a low touch, no touch world that COVID has really re-engineered how we even think about retail, for example, we're going to have fewer and fewer face-to-face interactions. We really need to make sure that they are all exceptional. And how do we do that if we
Hmm.
can't even measure them or harvest feedback? Without data driving those decisions, we have no way to make sure that our game is in shape. And so I think that current events are driving us to that.
Hmm.
Clearly, it's about prioritizing.
Yeah, you make a really good point. So, what would you consider to be the most valuable kind of employee recognition?
Yeah, well, I'm probably a little bit biased because of the domain in which I work, and
Sure.
but I do believe it's that external customer praise. It makes such a difference. And when your employees can build a relationship with your customers, the impact of that is almost immeasurable. I'll give you another small example. I made the mistake of buying a chain of restaurants, and I got into the restaurant business for a little while. And one of the things that used to always impress me is if you came into my restaurant and said, Mark, we want to sit in Samantha's section. We love her, right? That was nirvana to me. That meant that your relationship was not just my brand, it wasn't just my food, but you had such a deep seated relationship with that individual that you would come and ask for them. We want to turn everyone into that, right? We want everyone to have that kind of relationship. And if we can help facilitate that, it matters. So I think it's that external data, to be perfectly honest. I think it's the praise that comes from customers that acknowledge the job was well done. And when that praise is also shared with your supervisor or your employer, again, I just think that's really impactful.
So we often talk about recognition and then rewards in the same breath. How is recognition impacted by the presence or the lack thereof?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you should stack rank those two because it's really important to look at the data as it relates to compensation and rewards, and also make sure that you filter that based on the employee archetype or at least the classification. I've been talking a lot about frontline service sector employees, and the data there is indisputable. It's more about recognition than it is any other driver. In fact, almost all syndicated research that you can find from HR sources, and I mean, you can run the gamut from leading firms from Gallup to Forbes, PwC, Harvard Business Review. I mean, it runs the gamut. It's really about recognition and appreciation, not compensation. In fact, most of the data shows that around 20% or 1 out of 5 of your top customer service reps or frontline people will quit in the next year. And ironically, it's not about compensation, despite all the talk going on today about minimum wage or compensation. And by the way, those issues are super important. I'm not dismissing them. Or your top performers are leaving jobs, not because of that, and not even a conflict with the supervisor. It's about lack of appreciation. So we can't underestimate the financial value of, in essence, doing the right thing.
So I want to shift this conversation to talk a little bit about Grata, which amplifies everything we've been talking about. I understand it was actually inspired by a trip to Home Depot.
You are correct. You're correct. I made a trip to Home Depot some time ago, and I went on a Saturday with a honeydew list of things that I was asked to accomplish. And full confession, I'm not especially handy. But fortunately for me, the guy that waited on me was exceptionally handy. And I showed up with my list, and I had one of those experiences, and we've all had them, where I just had such an incredible experience from the perspective of customer service. This guy walked me up and down the aisles for an hour and 15 minutes, not only finding for me the products I needed to, remove a red wine stain from a limestone floor, to touch up a piece of antique furniture, but he took the time to give me detailed instructions on how to perform those tasks. You're like my personal Bob Vila, if I can pull out a name from the past.
Okay.
He basically was kind of like my mentor to show me how to do all these things. And I was so excited about the great service that I had gotten from him after I went through the self-checkout. I made a beeline for that elevated customer service manager stand that's where you do your returns. And there was a gentleman standing back there. And so I assumed he was the manager. So I said, "Excuse me, sir, you must be the manager. My name's Mark. I just want to let you know this guy that waited on me over in aisle 12 was unbelievable. He did this, he did that." And I'm kind of going into my spiel. And the guy sort of interrupted me and said, "Oh, yeah. He's Larry's terrific. I'll be sure and pass along. I'm not the manager, but hey, have a nice day." Completely blew me off. And honestly, I was angry. I was angry first and foremost because I thought this guy did a great job and he's not going to get any recognition or anything out of this. Even though I took the time to voice my opinion, it's going to benefit him zero. And then as I'm walking in my car, my CMO hat goes off. I've been the chief marketing officer at some large cap tech brands. And so I just knew that Home Depot had a major miss there, because when you have a customer that is that excited about their experience in your store and you didn't do anything to memorialize that, get me in a loyalty program, in some way at least acknowledge my feedback, I knew that it was a major miss for Home Depot, the retailer in this instance. And then lastly, when I got into my car, I got mad yet again, this time from the perspective of a customer. Because as I sat there, I thought, you know what? This really sucks. I would love to use him again and again the next time I have a project, but I'm not going to walk inside and ask him for his cell phone number. That's
Right.
awkward.
Awkward. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm not going to say, hey, you want to connect on Facebook? So there was no connectivity like there is for those of us in a white collar world for me to go join him on LinkedIn to have that connection. And that's really the genesis of this whole thing, was that our entire ecosystem in the service sector, blue collar arena, is disconnected because we're not talking to each other in Workday, Salesforce.com, and LinkedIn. We have a completely disintermediated ecosystem. And until we fix that by connecting customers with employees and their employers, there's not going to be a way to facilitate that.
Let's jump into the Grata app a little bit. Tell us how that works.
Well, look, I'll give you a point of reference. It's really easy for everyone to understand. You know how when you get out of an Uber, you get to give that driver a 5-star rating,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the option to say something nice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, you have the option to leave a tip, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we're asking in real time to harvest feedback. We mimic that exact same protocol, but in our own branded environment, where if you're in a restaurant and the check comes, either on the menu, or on the check presenter, there's a QR code. On the receipt, there's a QR code. The server may give you their business card with a QR code that you can very easily hit and immediately go to that same protocol. And I can say, wow, Jennifer was great. She really knew the menu. She was super friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I give her a 5-star rating. And then lastly, I would have the option, if you'd signed up with your Venmo coordinates, to tip you directly. Now, a restaurant obviously has a tip line on a check. So the utility there is less impactful than, say, at a discount tire store where you just saved me some money and told me you balanced my tires for free when I bought before. That's not a normal part of the service. And I might want to tip you $10 because you saved me $40. Yeah, making up the example. But the idea being that it's very easy for you in a seamless way to simply hit a QR code and go through that exact same sequence. 5-star rating, say something nice, optional tip.
So is the platform strictly a rating system, or does it allow for actual comments as well?
Yes, so that's the step 2, to say something nice, right? So
okay.
in that environment, the example I gave with complimenting Jennifer for being a great server, all of that data is then harvested, and it becomes a part of your permanent record if you are the server. So now Jennifer can pull up her resume for her next employer, and the employer might say, well, Jennifer, where have you worked? Well, I worked at XYZ. Are you good? Well, do you think you want to know if I'm good? Let me show you what my customers have to say. In fact, we have a publish feature in the app that if you hit print, it will take all of your work history, put it in a very contemporary resume template on page 1. And then on page 2, it will take all the customer names, their 5-star ratings, and their flattering comments about you as an addendum to your resume, so that when an employer says, are you good? You want to know what my customers think? I'm not just good, I'm great, and let me show you.
Nice. So customers and employers can give employees praise through Grata. Can employees do this to return the favor? Can they do the same thing, or is it just that one way?
Absolutely. So it's a two-way platform. Think LinkedIn and a Facebook mashup. So you create lists of connections or contacts, people that you have given a Grata to, or that have given you a Grata, and you have the ability to communicate with them. They can say nice things about you. You can say nice things about them. Of course, you have full edit features. So if you had comments that you didn't like, you have complete control over both your privacy and the presentation of your resume, just like you and I do in LinkedIn.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned that it's free for customers and employees. Does an employer have to subscribe to Grata in order to have their company and their employees show up on the app?
No. In fact, the first time an employee sets up their profile at a given business, we pull down Google API data and populate, and now your company, your new restaurant is in the portfolio. Nobody has to pay a dime. Employers can have all of their employees on the platform, and employees don't have to pay for the app. Employers don't have to pay for the privilege of being on the app. The only thing that is a for-fee service, much like LinkedIn, is if you want the data and analytics on the back end. We have a very robust enterprise management tool that allows an employer to look at all of their workers to see what are customers saying about them. How often are they engaging? I might want to build my view to look at teams or individual locations. So all the data and analytics, as well as the CRM, because we're harvesting customer email addresses and identities. So there's a marketing component as well. If you want to access the tools on the back end, they're available for a fee, just like you would on LinkedIn or Facebook or any other social media platform.
Okay. All right. So, and there's also an element of gamification to this app. And we've talked about gamification on Project HR before, but rewards and prizes. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about that?
You bet. And I think that's a great one, by the way. And I'll give you a small business example and a large business. A small business, a restaurant, wants to get everybody excited about upping their game on service, a little bit of competitive spirit, says, we're now on the Grata platform, everybody. We want to see whoever gets the most Gratas in the next week, we're going to give a $100 prize to, right? We see that happening inside of businesses. On a larger scale, we have a Fortune 100 hotel company, and we're in one of their properties in South Florida. And they've literally gone and institutionalized Grata as that customer touch point. They've given every employee a business card with their individual QR code, so a customer can go straight to that employee's profile. They have QR codes placed around the hotel waiting areas, the elevator stand, table tents on the bars and tables, even incorporated the QR code into business receipts or into checks, so that customers can easily give feedback. And they're paying those employees $1 for every one that they get. So again, this whole idea of, guys, we've got a way to harvest praise on all the great work that you do, and we're even going to pay you for it. I think those kind of gamification techniques are things that get everybody involved. It also gets everybody moving the same direction. People should be better naturally. Why? Because for the first time, they're all accountable in a way that they weren't previously. But also, I think it's human nature. Once you start getting some Gratas and getting that praise, there's a lot of fun for frontline employees to harvest that feedback.
And I also saw you kind of talked about it a little bit that you have the ability to leave exceptional employees a tip through Grata. How exactly does that work?
Sure. So depending on the organization, the default position is that the tipping is turned on. So if you're a server at a restaurant or you're working the counter at Starbucks, you could input your Venmo coordinates, and we go through Venmo to do direct peer-to-peer paying without you having to set up an account. Some of our customers, our enterprise customers, don't want to have tipping in their environment because it might create some unintended consequences. So a large box retailer might not want to have the ability for customers to tip. So in that instance, we have an on-off, basically a binary, so that we can disable the tipping function. But most people use the tipping and have been quite excited about the ability to get tips direct to their personal checking account through the app.
Right. All right, Mark, we're going to take some time out for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and our guest today is Mark Bunting, CEO and founder of Grata. We are back. So, Mark, tell us about the Grata community. How do you anticipate your users engaging with the app outside of simply adding ratings and earning rewards?
Yeah. Well, the ratings and the rewards, of course, are foundational, but also this ability for you to publish your resume has a tremendous amount of value. But it is the community that you point out where you start to see some really exciting capabilities. For example, when you have that ecosystem built, when you have a LinkedIn for the long end of the tail of human capital for that blue collar sector to be able to document their good deeds and build their book of business, you also create recruitment opportunities. So, for example, if I decided as a restaurant operator I wanted to find bartenders with a 4.5 rating or greater, today I can't do that. I can go to Indeed and I can go to other job sites and I can find, in essence, dumb resumes that will tell me how long somebody's worked, where they've worked previously. But there are zero, and I stress zero, qualitative inputs that let me know which resume represents an employee that's really good versus one that's just okay. And so now for the first time, that rating system allows me to stack rank that human capital, make better hiring decisions. And by the way, not only if I want, can I now hire the best of the best if that's my objective, but for the employee, it should mean that their compensation should move in sympathy. I would have paid at my restaurant more dollars per hour to hire that top talent that I thought I could retain and not churn, and also would treat my customers better. If I can identify those people, I'll pay more. So it really democratizes opportunity for both the employer and the employee through data to know who's good and who's great.
So, one of the benefits of the app is giving employees a record of sorts of their own great performance. But what happens when they move to another job? Can they take that record with them? Does it belong to them?
Absolutely. So again, going back to that LinkedIn or Facebook model, your collection of relationships, your collection of posts, all the work history that you might document from satisfied customers, quite frankly, should be yours. And that was part of the motivation behind the app. So if you go to your next employer, your Grata profile goes with you. Whether your employer pays for the data services or not is completely irrelevant. When Mark goes out and does a good job and racks up 50 Gratas where customers say great things about Mark, and Mark builds a customer list of those same 50 customers that he's now connected to, Mark has the ability to move down the street to a different restaurant, and all of that experience goes with him, quite frankly, as it should.
On your website, you mentioned that Grata can also facilitate recruitment. Can you share with our listeners how that works?
Sure. So in that same scenario where you have people using the platform, we now have this ability to go in and search for talent based on a rating. So if I decided that I wanted to hire new servers at my restaurant and I only wanted those with a 4.5 rating or greater, the ability for me to find those human beings and identify them versus what takes place today on an Indeed or another job board means I can now use that qualitative input to stack rank that human capital and hire the best of the best.
All right. So, how can our listeners find out more about you and about Grata?
Well, you can find out more about Grata by going to GrataPro, GRATAPro.com, and you'll get all the information you need there. You can download from the website or on iTunes or Google Play. We're available on both platforms. Again, everything is free for you to use. So I would just encourage people to take advantage of the app and see the power that can come from investing in tools that allow your frontline people to get the recognition that, quite frankly, they've deserved for a long time. And we've been a bit remiss in collecting. And it's really that easy, and it's free.
Yeah, I love that. It's just that easy. So I want to let our listeners know that a link to Grata's website will also be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today, projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, Mark, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions we ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
Oh my gosh, I'll do my best.
All right. So our first question is a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about Grata, which is all about recognizing employee excellence. Pretty sure I know which one you're going to pick, but which of the following quotes about excellence best represents your personal point of view? Excellence is never an accident, or next to excellence is the appreciation of it?
Oh, goodness. You know, I think you know probably where I'm going to land on that one. But I do think that excellence is not an accident. I mean, look, it's a commitment. There are human beings that are just really, really good at what they do because they have a personal passion for greatness, and it may become more of an unconscious effort. But I think at the end of the day, it's about focus.
For sure. So tell me, what is the best book you've read recently?
Oh, goodness. The best book I've read recently. So I've been going down a little bit of a history trail on my stock and trade, which was advertising. And I went back to read one of Ogilvy's books, which, again, kind of brings me back to center in terms of those basic tenets around making sure that you have the ability to articulate in a clear and concise manner your value proposition. And so I've been spending a little bit of time in some Ogilvy books as late, and that's probably my most recent.
Excellent. Excellent. So what is your favorite thing about being an entrepreneur?
Wow. Well, you know, I've jumped back and forth. I told you before, I've been C-level at large organizations in tech. And I've also hung the shingle and done a lot of startups. And I think what I really love about entrepreneurship is I just love seeing ideas come to life. At the end of the day, I'm really a startup guy. I love seeing ideas and the energy and enthusiasm behind those.
Yes.
Bring products to market and bring transformational change. And I have to tell you, on this venture, it's kind of a culmination of my whole career. The idea that simply pausing for a moment to acknowledge another human being who did a good job, things we think, but never had a seamless, frictionless way to do so, pausing for a moment to say, job well done, could drive business outcomes for large organizations and do the right thing by human beings. I just get so motivated at trying to crack the code to figure out how to serve both of those organizations. And I just love I think I just love the hunt every single day to try to find out what the solutions are and how we can bring them to life.
So exciting. I love that, where you saw a need and you went after it and have filled it. All right. So tell me, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Yes, the best piece of advice. Well, again, there's lots, and they can run the gamut from spiritually, professionally, and personally. I'll try to stay on topic. I think as an entrepreneur, the best advice I probably ever got was really about that sort of stick-to-itiveness, that hard work ethic around bringing your ideas and your passions to life. If you're like me and you weren't the smartest person in the room, and you might not have begun life with a monumental head start. More times than not, I've seen energy and work ethic overcome challenges and, quite frankly, be the great equalizer. So at the end of the day, if you've got a passion for something, you really believe in your entrepreneurial quest, just don't take no. That tenacity, more times than not, will rule the day.
Love it. So last question, who or what inspires you?
Wow. Oh, I'm inspired by so many things. I can never nail just one individual or thing that inspires me. I'm motivated by a host of different motivations. I love seeing people's careers advance. I love seeing human beings move forward. I didn't have that in my youth, but as a professor at the University of Texas and as an entrepreneur working in the human capital space, I really enjoy seeing how you can spend some time either through mentorship or new technologies to improve somebody else's lot in life. And that's probably the motivation that's nearest and dearest to my heart at this particular juncture, is seeing how you can drive outcomes for other human beings and leave a mark.
Nice. So I wanted to thank you for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Mark.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, Jennifer.
Thanks to our listeners. And once again, this is your reminder to grab the companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR, or you know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. On Twitter and Facebook, you can find us at Projections, and on LinkedIn at Projections Inc. And certainly last but not least, make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR. Subscribe to the podcast on our website. You can also drop us a line, leave us a review, or simply give us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.